I'll start with David, and we'll go through the introductions briefly. If you guys can just tell us a little about yourselves and your companies. Try to keep it to a minute. But you'll have plenty of time to talk when I get to the questions.
Great. Thank you, Rob. My name's David Goswick. I'm the CEO of Houze, spelled H-O-U-Z-E. The Z-E stands for Zero Energy, and greatly appreciate the opportunity to be here. We are creating a network of living labs that serve as a great place for demonstrating user experiences that benefit lives. So thank you very much. We like to say the ZE is, it stands for zero, and it goes beyond energy, but I'll elaborate when I have more time.
Great. Thank you, David. Welcome to the panel.
Yeah, and I'm Mike Watson. I'm the Vice President of Product Strategy at Cree. We're actually the world's only fully vertically integrated LED lighting manufacturer. And I think during the course of tonight, you'll find out why is the lighting guy doing here in an IoT panel. But there's a logical reason for that. The other part of my background is I actually was the original founder, or one of the founders of the Infrared Data Association, where we launched Bluetooth out of it. So I have a long background in connectivity and smartphones, and I would have raised my hand as I implemented the first HTML browser back in 1995 on where we developed the AT&T PocketNet phone. So with PCSI, so I have a long history in that space.
And light is inherently a wireless technology.
And light is inherently, in fact, much more bandwidth than we have in RF, and that's probably a future discussion. Right?
Great, thanks, Mike.
Hi guys, my name is Phani Pandrangi, and I'm the Chief Product Officer at Key, so KII. We're a Japanese company. We're headquartered in Tokyo, but I drive product from our Silicon Valley office, so I'm responsible for product and marketing. Key is basically a platform company, so whereas David is doing the smart home stuff and Mike is doing smart lighting, we are more horizontal, so we are a platform on which things like smart home, smart lighting, smart parking, things like that get built. And from our vantage point, this today's topic, smart energy management, we see a number of use cases and projects, both on the consumer side and on the commercial side. So hope to talk about that today.
Great, thanks. Okay, we'll go ahead and jump right into the questions. So the first one is actually an easy question. What are the demand drivers for smart buildings and smart homes and for smart energy management? And let's try to answer that in the question of, what has to happen in order for a large enough market to emerge, and how much of the demand is expected to be new versus retrofitting existing buildings?
But I can start. In our case, it's the demand drivers are. I'll break them into two categories. One is regulatory. There's a regulatory demand driver, and California is different than the rest of the country. So there's a lot of regulatory pressure to ease the grid and lower the energy consumption. So that's one of the drivers. The other is actually economic driver. And in the lighting case, it's one of those things that 20% of the electricity bill of a business, a commercial business, is electricity, or is lighting. A lot of other electricity cost is lighting, and it's a significant part of their overall cost. And so the driver is initially going to be just economic for enabling smart energy management. But once you get the energy management in there, you have an infrastructure to do so many more productive things for the businesses.
Thanks. David?
Yeah, I would say that the disruptors are driving this, and I would use the Tesla Powerwall as a good example. I mean, it really heightens the awareness of what's possible and what's coming, and my guess is they're probably building a huge database for whatever is next. So they're driving it. I think from a cost standpoint, we really have to change the conversation to total cost of lifestyle. What are these lifestyle benefits related to health and energy and comfort? And so it creates a great platform for new business models that I think will change everything. But I think that it's really the disruption that's going to cause the consuming public to push pause and want more information.
Great, Phani?
I think, so when we were getting started, Rob showed this hype cycle. So smart energy management on the consumer side anyway is in the, going in the trough of disillusionment. So before it can get to the slope of enlightenment and plateau of productivity, what needs to happen is that, right now is actually quite critical in the sense that we are going down the slope. But at the same time, we want to take, some of these initiatives off the ground. So which is kind of trying to land an airplane in crosswinds or something, So the drivers have to be like something big, So regulatory is a good example that Mike mentioned. For example, India, like the government of India has like a smart city program. So there is a clear, initiative. We want to do 100 smart cities for these reasons, that kind of stuff. That's actually causing a lot of, interesting smart city-oriented initiatives happening in India at various levels, state level, city level, and so on. And part of it is actually around energy, easing the grid. Like, for example, that is a demand driver, like, in fact, like pushed by the government. So that's one. Other things that we are seeing, have like, depending on which segment of IoT and smart cities we are talking about, the demand drivers could be quite different. So some things like parking and things like that we see. The drivers are about, like, if anyone has tried to find parking in San Francisco, the demand driver is pretty clear, right? They want to ease, the whole situation and increase user experience. They want people to come to the city. So for parking, the demand driver is that, but for smart lighting, energy savings is huge. But I just want to say that it depends on which segment, and it also depends on geography. So, for example, when I talk about like energy savings,
That's actually question 4.
but when I talk about energy savings in Japan, they're not as excited about it as we are, like at least in California we are. They say, oh, really? People are worried about like energy savings? I say, yeah, but they are not, So it depends on geography, the demand drivers.
Okay, great. So that leads naturally to the next easy question, and that is, who's going to benefit and who's going to pay? If it's going to be a push market, who has to build it first? And if it's demand pull, who's going to demand it first? Is it going to be building owners, developers, energy companies, city, state, county, governments? David, you want to start?
I think it's somewhat of a paradox. I think you could build a case that it's a pull-push situation. The consumer's that pay for it. Consumer, at the smart home level, the consumer's the only one paying for anything. So if you look at the new builder world, for example, they're not going to build it unless the consumer says they want it. I think it's an awareness challenge. I think that it's a whole conversation problem that we've talked about smart homes for decades, and it doesn't really have a good image. If you look back from the Jetsons to the next decade to the next decade, it has been hyped for so long. So the question is, where did we start that curve? But I think the opportunity is right now staring us in the face. I think you're going to see in the blink of an eye it shift. And I think the timing of that is a later question too, of when that may happen. But I think it's a convergence from a lot of different players. The consumer is going to demand it if we tell the story right. I think there's got to be a great improvement in storytelling.
So what is that story, Mike?
It's actually, that was a good straight man there. It's, the funny thing is, and the original question, who's that storyteller? The original question is who benefits, who pays, that type of thing. It's not initially a consumer or an occupant in a building that is the demand pull for the, but when they see and see what can happen with energy efficient buildings or inefficient homes, or in our case, lighting. And once you're under this type of stuff, you never want to go back. And it's one of those things that education is, original question, education is really big. When we talk about things like energy efficiency, who thinks that way, right? In Japan, who actually thinks I need better energy efficiency? But if you say you are costing yourself $7 per bulb in your home to run, or you can have a $1 per year bulb alternative, you're saving $6. That's a completely different conversation, right, that you're having. And you're talking about $6 times 30 bulbs per average North American home. That's not trivial. And so when you look at, how this is going to happen, initially it's in commercial space, it's the building owners and operators because they have a demand for saving money, and the economics are there. And when you put in energy efficient, whether it's lighting or HVACs or whatever, they benefit. And then the occupants will benefit in a variety of ways, whether it's that business having capital to actually grow, they benefit in that way. Whether it's in the lighting case, you go from fluorescent lights, which are RGB, and your brain is making up the light gap between RG and B, and you get tired. You go into a light that actually is a full bandwidth source, and you aren't tired like the sunlight. You have a more productive environment. In schools, when you can actually tune the light color to be able to make something that is more blue and follows the sunlight during the day, so you trick the brain into being more alert while you're in a classroom, kids learn better. So the ultimate beneficiary is going to be the consumer of the product, whether it's commercial or in the home. The initial beneficiary is going to be driven, again, I think, by some specific application or some regulatory drive or pure economics. And that's what's going to deliver an environment where everyone can benefit.
And I can say that in the smart home, the additional benefit is my wife won't tell me every time I come down the stairs to turn the lights off at the top of the stairs.
Exactly. Yeah.
Regarding who pays and who benefits, here's an example. Like in China, we are working with like a very big partner. Starts with an A. They compete with Amazon, so you can figure it out. But they're one of the things that they're doing is smart buildings. Now, and these are smart buildings that are used for commercial, so offices and stuff, not homes. But anyway, in terms of who buys the technology, and if you think about smart buildings technology, there are like multiple vendors here. There is the platform, there is like devices, sensors, network, like all kinds of things. So in terms of who buys the technology, it's really that partner. And they are actually not just retrofitting, but they're also building new buildings. But in terms of who benefits, it's the tenants that are going to occupy. Previously a building, it's walls and some infrastructure. That's what they're paying rent for. But now all of a sudden they get all these additional automation and all the smart things that are happening, everything from employees entering the parking structure all the way to them going to the office. A lot of automation happens. So the beneficiary is really people paying this rent, renting the space. That's just on the smart building side. But again, depending on which sector we are talking about, who pays could be completely different. Like in some cases, the instigator or who actually is trying to make this whole thing work could be the one that is not paying. Like for example, government of India, if they are pushing all these programs, they're not actually shelling out a whole lot of money. Like maybe it's a different level, like cities or states that might be paying. It could be smart buildings, which are actually components of a smarter city. So on and so forth.
Okay, great. So the next one is, and I think we've actually touched on this a little bit. So it's a slightly different twist, which is where will demand happen first, and then, geographically and by segment.
Yeah, and I think that it's really clear to me that demand is going to happen first in the commercial sector for a variety of reasons. It's actually a bigger opportunity from a business standpoint. The benefits are a little bit obvious, and to go back into what Phani was basically saying, when you're looking at changing a technology or going from a non-connected world to a connected world, ask yourself when you're going home, why? Right? Just ask why. Why would you even do that? I mean, and you go back in history, why do we have smartphones? Why do we have even ATM machines? Initially, if you looked at how these things were driven in, it was things like they would have tellers coming out to the ATM machine showing you how to, they're dragging you out of the bank, showing you how to use the ATM machine, paying you to use the ATM machine, and years later, when you build dependence, you're paying $3 a transaction on a non-network, right? And that is what better is defined initially to me, is they dragged my ass out and I learned how to use it and I got a benefit and I didn't have to pay for it. The same thing with smartphones. If it wasn't for AT&T, and I'll say AT&T because they're more local, I'll ignore all the other ones, right? So if it wasn't for, and a sponsor, but if it wasn't for AT&T subsidizing and then bearing it in your bill, the cost of a phone, right, which is a business model issue, we wouldn't have smartphones. So, and sort of related on the issue of who pays, it's never going to be the consumer that says, I will pay $500 for a phone, right, or I will pay twice as much for a light bulb, or I will pay X amount to put a connected home or connected building in. It's going to be someone getting that benefit and creating a business model to pay for that. It's an ROI that is then delivered in a very unique and I'll say a way we don't know. If we figured it out, it would be here. Because this isn't about technology.
I think that gets to your point, David,
but ultimately,
about the disruptors.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the consumer's still paying for it for the smart home.
Ultimately, they do. Yeah.
They just may not know what they're paying for. But
Yes.
that value equation is the opportunity. And there was some research I read the other day that the average consumer thinks about electricity 9 minutes per year. So that's probably when they're paying their bill. And they don't like their utility. So the opportunity is to shift that and to change the math in the equation so that we look at total cost of lifestyle, that upfront cost of putting in LEDs, reduces that monthly cost, but it also changes the value of one asset versus another. So two homes that look alike but perform differently, that cost a different amount to own and operate, is different. And then when you drill down to data like indoor air quality, that's a discussion that creates a whole nother play. So I think we have to look at it holistically.
I think in terms of sectors, like which sectors and geography, hugely varied. Like again, from our vantage point, we see U.S., Europe, Japan, China, and India, all these regions. And for example, smart home, not going to be big, in India right now. Smart city, yes. In some regions, all these Wi-Fi based solutions not going to work. There's no Wi-Fi. So somehow it has to be based on some cellular or whatever else. So it greatly depends on geography. But on the sectors, I totally agree with Mike that commercial side, there's just a lot of opportunity and just a lot more savings that can be done, at least on the energy side. On the consumer side, again, just sticking to the topic of energy management, it's not fashionable or to say, oh, I saved like $5 on energy, versus like saying, oh, I have this thing that automates everything, like from the moment I pull into the driveway to like whatever, like everything is automated. That's interesting. Energy, not so much. I mean, you don't brag about, oh, I saved $2 today, but you like the new iPhone or whatever the new gadget is. So on the consumer side, the other thing is that also that there's just so many different kinds of solutions that people are like flooding the market with, all kinds of hubs, like buy our hub and buy our bulb and buy our everything. Once you pick a hub, everything is like tied to that hub. consumers, find it very difficult to figure out like who to go with. So consumer side, it's kind of on the energy management and savings side anyway, it's a little bit sketchy right now, but commercial side, definitely, I agree with Mike.
Great. So I guess that sort of leads naturally to the next question, which is, when's it going to happen in a big way? And I think for that, I started with the example of the iPhone. And, to what degree do you think that sort of inflection point, basically in what time frame do you think that's possible?
I mean, if people are not taking the boil the ocean approach, it can happen now. Like if you want to focus on energy savings from lighting, Mike has a solution already, But if you want to say, I want to save like energy on everything, like I want to connect lighting, HVAC, this, that, all of that, and then realize energy savings, that's harder now, because who's going to spend all the money in like putting all this together? But if it is one thing and that's already showing you some energy savings right away, and you can choose that, you can do it now. And again, like if you at the buildings level, for example, lighting is an obvious choice right now. But as you kind of go expand the size of these projects, and then you think about smart city. Again, smart city also, you want to be the smartest city or just a smarter city. Maybe you want to just take care of traffic issues, or maybe you just want to solve parking problem. If you fix that and start small versus boiling the ocean, then there's just a lot of opportunity right now. But as we go forward, I think the scale and the types of things that we can solve also change. Anyway, that's what I think.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I want to restate your question, because you say, when will it happen, right? And I always am a believer you have to define what is it, right? And if you go back to your hype cycle, if it is hype, then even your cycle says it will never happen. Right? So what you have to look at is, what is it now? And I'm a real big believer in going in the past and kind of learning from it, and certainly in technology cycles. We always love to talk about the iPhone, but the iPhone was a notable version of many its that came before it, right? So you had to have MMS and Nokia to do it. You had to have BlackBerry, and this is, our lighting example is, we're sort of like BlackBerry, right? We know how to do email of lighting, right? So it's sort of the, we can push notify you. That actually was a smartphone that was widely adopted for a single very valuable function, right? In the commercial space, and then it leveraged into the consumer space. And then this unbelievably better thing came and wiped out BlackBerry, right? Which is an interesting thing to follow. But so for us, it is now, right? We actually sell, on the lighting space, if you look around, this is set up like a network, right? Lighting is a network, exists. A lot of our business today is actually selling smart lighting purely because while we can go into a commercial customer in this particular case and say, we'll save you 50% from your fluorescent lighting systems or halogen or whatever, depending on where you are, we can save an additional 40% by putting simple occupancy and light sensors and a thin, wireless connectivity layer in there, and that part pays back in a couple of months. It's not even a question what people should buy. So it, from our standpoint, already exists. If you look at it from a pure application standpoint, and what we do that's really nice is you bring the network so other people can leverage it, and that's how we do it as an industry, wisely and not proprietarily and kind of islands of its, is going to determine how fast we get to a broader vision.
I'm going to say that phrase, islands of it. That's a great one.
I gotta say, I've never heard anyone say we are the BlackBerry of something. Everyone wants to be the Uber.
In 2006, a lot of people wanted to be BlackBerry.
Before they died, yeah, before they died.
Uber of something or Apple of something.
Yeah.
So the question on timing, I think looking at look at what Nest has done, where they came from, and they just caught an awful lot of attention and awareness and conversation. And then we're a very active member within the Linux Foundation's Internet of Things All Scene. And a year ago there were 80 companies, and today there's about 230. And there's all kinds of products coming that some may be disruptive, some may be novelties, but it adds value to the whole. And when is that tipping point? I think it's probably potentially fourth quarter of 2016, where it starts to tip over and it accelerates so fast it never stops. It could be early next year, but it's companies like Key and Cree working together, integrating and creating a new math that it's maybe like 2 + 2 = 22 instead of 3.
That's great. And, I think it's funny, I like to revisit the hype cycles because, to go back to the original statement, things always happen later and faster than anyone expects, right? And so it'll be interesting to see, but it's clear that, from this discussion, there's clear benefits today that can be delivered today. Right. There are its that are, clear benefits. So, okay, with that, I think we're going to turn now to audience questions.